for is a little basic background in Iran, and what it boils down to is this: um, there's a Shah, and the Shah is what we call prince in Iran or king, whatever you want. The Shah goes back to the early 20th century. A guy by the name of Reza was the first Shah, and he was a dude. He was like 6'8", rode around on a horse with a scimitar, those big curved swords. He basically ruled the country with an iron fist, but at the same time was actually pretty well liked by a lot of Iranians because he tried to modernize them. He was good to the people. He was kind of the guy you didn't mess with, but you kind of respected. Um, his son Mohammad Reza, not quite as respected. He was just kind of a rich kid doofus, basically would be the way to describe it. He was not nearly as popular with the people. Spent most of his life outside of Iran, so he didn't really know what they were all about. To give you a sense of what he was like, or what the people thought of him, when he was, I think he was beginning of his reign, late 40s, early 50s, late 1940s, I think. There was a attempted assassination of him, and so a guy came up and was going to shoot him, and he was surrounded by armed bodyguards, and instead of jumping in front of him, the armed bodyguards jumped away from him, to give you a sense that even his bodyguards weren't all that interested in helping this guy out. So like you can imagine, like guy walks up, puts a gun to the president or to the Shah's head or to the Shah's body, and instead of trying to do anything, all these bodyguards are getting their own selves taken care of, which is kind of odd considering their name is bodyguard. They're the only body that they were guarding was their own. But that gives you a sense of how not well liked this guy really was. He was just kind of nothing. Now, in that same time, a popular guy in Iran does come to the forefront, a guy by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh, who was a member of parliament, a well-known philosopher, politician, very popular guy. And he kind of comes up along the way throughout the system, and the Shah doesn't like him. The people that are friends of the Shah don't like him. More importantly, the British don't like him because the British own a lot of oil fields in Iran. You would know them at the time. They were called Anglo-Iranian or Anglo-Persian Oil. They changed their name to Anglo-Iranian. They then changed their name to British Petroleum. Now they're just Beyond Petroleum, or BP Oil. So BP Oil goes all the way back to Iran in this time. And the British did not like Mossadegh because he was basically advocating that the Iranian government should take back those oil fields, that it was their property, and it wasn't the British property. So the British wanted to keep him out. Well, he rises up and gets more and more popular. Eventually, he gets to the point where, and one day in Parliament, one of the Shah's buddies gets up and starts to say, Mossadegh, you're this huge problem. All you ever do is criticize. All you ever do is poke shots at the Shah. If you think it's so easy, why don't you make yourself president? Or why don't you become president? Why don't you run for president? And Mossadegh kind of shuffles up to the front of the stage and says, okay. And he runs for president. And he becomes president, and Great Britain immediately starts plotting a way to kick him out and get the Shah back in power. And so you've got the Shah, who's still the king, Mossadegh, who's the president. The president has more power in terms of day-to-day politics than the Shah really does, and the Shah, being kind of this doofus, as I said before, can't really do much. So people are all in favor of Mossadegh. People are in favor of him taking over the oil, and he starts making noises about how he's going to what's called nationalize the oil fields. Basically, what that means is the Iranian government will take that land back, and the British will be out of luck. Well, Great Britain decides they can't have this, so they start plotting a overthrow of Mossadegh, and they try to get the United States involved in it. The United States resists and says, no, this isn't our thing. However, in 1952, the guy who was the U.S. president, Harry Truman, leaves because his term is up, and a new president comes in, Eisenhower, and Eisenhower's administration is like, yeah, we actually don't like this guy. He sounds a little like a communist to us, and the Americans were all worried about communism. So the Americans jump on board, and they plot a coup. Basically what they do is they hire people to go into the streets and beat up protesters. Then, What they then do is hire other people to come back and try to beat up the people who are beating up the protesters. The idea is they want to create as much chaos as possible in the country among Iranians to make it seem like the only people who can handle it are to bring the military back and the Shah back to sort of keep control. So basically, the United States and Great Britain plot this entire thing where they create chaos in Iran, get Mossadegh discredited because he can't control the country. Military comes back, Shah gets reinstated, back to the Shah. Most people in Iran know what happened. They know the United States did it. They know that the Great Britain did it. They are not happy about it. They hate the Shah because the Shah was inept in the first place, and now not only was he inept, but now he's actually overthrown a democratically elected guy. So the Shah, of course, not being a complete idiot, realizes he has to do something to keep his power. So what does he do? He creates secret police who try to root out anybody who's protesting, anybody who's saying anything against the government, and he hires a secret police to go in and essentially capture them, murder them, put them in prison for no reason, etc. etc. He gets worse and worse and worse over the course of the next 20 years. People hate the Shah because of this, that he's just a massive dictator who's destroying human rights in Iran. This leads up to 1979. These people finally have had enough. The Shah, in the late 70s, and he gets cancer. He goes to the United States to get cancer treatment at the Mayo Clinic. And this, of course, upsets the Iranian people because they already think this guy's a puppet of the United States. And now where does he go when he gets sick? He goes to his favorite country, the United States. So this is when the revolt begins, 1979. Revolt begins. Coming back to the country for the revolt is a guy by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini, Khomeini, Khomeini. It sounds like Khomeini, but it's pronounced Khomeini. And he had been exiled by the Shah because he was a religious leader. The Shah didn't want him there. He comes back. There's a revolution against the government. They overthrow. They kick out the Shah for good. He's gone. And then after this, they have to decide what government is good for the country. Khomeini, being the powerful, intelligent, relatively popular person, essentially negotiates a way to make himself the new head. And they decide, instead of having a democratic system like some of the country wanted, they actually create a fundamentalist Islamic country. And the first thing that happens is that country then declares that the United States is the great Satan, the great enemy, because, I mean, look what they had done to us before. Look at all these things about them. The United States embassy in Iran is overthrown by Iranian college students who then capture Americans in the embassy and keep them for 444 days. And we see the beginning of what we have now, which is an icy relationship between the United States and Iran, because Iran has all this historical baggage, plus the Islamic fundamentalism. Altogether, this basically means that they are this fundamentalist country which doesn't really allow a whole lot of human rights. Even they didn't before with the Shah, but they haven't really gotten any better on that. They have essentially rules about Islam being the only religion in the country that is officially associated with the government, and they have this great hatred of the United States. In short, that's basically how we get to 1979 and how we get to the point where the United States is enemies with Iran. Iran is who they are in terms of their Islamic fundamentalist state, and Ayatollah Khomeini, who's since passed away, is no longer president, is no longer the supreme leader, but he's been replaced by a guy by the name of Ayatollah Khamenei, Kha instead of Kho. He's the new and current, not new, I guess he's been there for 30 years, the current supreme leader of Iran. That's about it. Get you from 1953 when Mossadegh comes in and then is overthrown, to 1979 when the Shah is overthrown, to today when we've got an Islamic state in Iran and a general dislike between the United States and Iran.